Amen. Okay, we're going to look at that passage from the book of Daniel, and we're continuing our series where we're looking at the hidden gods that might be in our hearts with their influence over us. And the one we're looking at today is the subject of power. And to a lesser degree or a greater degree, this is something that we all have in some various ways. Power is something that a psychologist called Alfred Adler, who was a big name in psychology apparently, he called it the great human obsession. So it's something that human beings are obsessed about. And one of the most influential people on the political scene in the last century, Henry Kissinger, described power as an aphrodisiac. Something which gets the blood racing and the hormones flowing. This is something that power can do. And so having described power in those terms, we're naturally going to turn our attention to chickens, because that's where you go after talking about an aphrodisiac. And I know I'm potentially on dangerous ground here because we do have some chicken experts in the room. There are people who know far, far more about chickens than me, and so if you see Philip shaking your head at anything I'm about to say, I got it off someone else. So, as far as my research on chickens goes, which is not that comprehensive, I'm told that this is true. If you get 10 chickens that have never met each other before, and you place them in a pen together, and you give them access to food, and you give them water, and you give them places to roost, you'll be able to observe something happen among that group. The chickens will form a social hierarchy. Chickens do it, based upon the dominance of one chicken over another. Am I getting any nods? Excellent, fantastic. So, through a series of skirmishes, the chickens will, by pecking at each other and getting each other, will determine who is numero uno chicken. They'll find out who is the best one. This chicken is able to peck and intimidate any other chicken in the pen. It will have the first pick of the food. It will be able to get water whenever it wants. It will have the best roosting spot. And if the mood so takes it, it will have as many romantic chicken encounters as it desires. See, power is an aphrodisiac. Below this will be chicken number 2, who's still in a pretty good position. It can peck and intimidate everything below it. It can get a lot of food. It can get a lot of water. It has its fair share of romance as well. All it has to do is keep an eye out for chicken number 1, and everything's okay. Below this is chicken number 3, and so on, until you get to chicken number 10, who's pecked and intimidated by everyone, gets the scraps, and generally has a miserable life. Always pecked, never the pecker. And this is where the phrase about a pecking order comes from. It's not just a phenomenon which is restricted to chickens either. It happens all through the animal kingdom. Lobsters do it as well, apparently. And human beings, yeah, they do. Human beings do it as well. Human beings form social hierarchies. So it might not center around which one of us can peck another person the hardest. It might do. But it will happen in some way. So think back to your school days. The first day when you transitioned from junior school to secondary school, and you knew people from other junior schools were all coming together and you were meeting in the same place, you were nervous. You were nervous. Why was that? Because you didn't quite know where you fitted in to this new environment. Even as human beings, we build ourselves into little hierarchies. At school, dominant groups form. Dominant characters reveal themselves. And after a while, you know where you fit. You know where you fit in the scheme of things. Power is all over the place, all over the place. And as well as being described as an obsession or an aphrodisiac, it's also been said that power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think that's fairly clear. You've just got to look at the history of the world and probably the present day as well to see that power does corrupt people. So in China, what do we have at the moment? We have a leader who's just managed to get passed into law that he's president for life because he wants power. He wants to keep it. In Russia, there's elections coming up, and according to the BBC, the only people that are allowed to stand against Vladimir Putin are those who have no chance of winning at all. Any viable candidates, they're not allowed to stand. Power corrupts people. You have North Korea with a leader who will routinely execute anyone who sees as a threat, even his own family members. It goes all through history. In the last century, in Russia, in Stalin, they had to install a bell whenever he was giving a speech because everyone was terrified to stop clapping first. If you stopped clapping first, you were arrested. So let's have a bell so everyone can stop at exactly the same time. It goes all through history. If you go into the Bible, you have King Herod, who ordered the death of 2 of his wives and 3 of his sons. One of his sons he ordered the execution of on his own deathbed. That's how obsessed about power he was. And yet, it's not just restricted to leaders. It's not. It's all through society. So after the referendum that led to Brexit, what were some of the news stories that followed the next few days? You would have people on buses, because their view was the one in power, they felt that they could abuse immigrants on a bus. They wouldn't have done it the day before, but as soon as they felt they had power, that came right to the surface. A manager in a workplace, and maybe some of you have encountered this, can make people feel absolutely miserable. They stick to the rules, they're a job's worth. They see those under them as resources, not as individuals to nurture. A family member, and don't look at anyone if they're in the room at the minute, a family member can wield so much power over the rest of the family that everyone tiptoes around them, especially at Christmas and times like this. It could be in your family, you just know you don't mess with grandma. You don't mess with her. That wasn't a confession about my family. So to a lesser or greater extent, the hidden God of power is everywhere. It's one that we're all potentially influenced by, and Nebuchadnezzar is an example of what power does to you. When we look at his life, we'll see he lived for power. We'll see what it does to you, and we'll also see how we can get over it as well. So with that in place, let's turn to the book of Daniel. So have the reading open there at page 888. And let's look at this man Nebuchadnezzar. Let's look at his life. And if we're going to look at his life, we have to paint a picture beyond what was read for us to get an idea of what he was like. Because if you know the book of Daniel, he's not just a kind of semi-comic character who has bad dreams and builds statues. There's a really steely side to this guy when you look at him, a dangerous side to him. So in chapter 1, if you just flick back there, when Daniel and his friends are in a kind of training group to become part of his elite, they've resolved not to eat the king's food. And we get a hint as to what Nebuchadnezzar's like. So in chapter 1 and verse 10, someone who's looking after Daniel and his friends, he says, "I'm afraid of my lord the king who has assigned you your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men of your age? Then the king would have my head because of you." Someone is scared that they could die if the people under them don't look good because of this king. And that's just not someone exaggerating. If you go to the next chapter, in chapter 2, when he's had a dream and he wants his wise men to tell him what the dream means, in chapter 2, verse 5, we again get to see what this guy is like. He says, "This is what I firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was, and if you do not interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble." That's not a very nice guy. If you go into an appraisal at work and your boss says something like that, it's not a good day. No one at any point is ever saying, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, he's such a joker when he says these things." No, they take him absolutely seriously. Later on in that chapter, the death squads are ready to go round and pick up people and execute them. Chapter 3, let's see some more of what this guy is like. He's built a statue, and he's ordered that everyone should bow down to it. And if anyone doesn't bow down to his statue, then they're going to get thrown into a furnace. So in verse 13 of chapter 3, there are some people who will not bow down. And what do we see? He's furious with rage. Absolutely furious. And by verse 19, he's furious with them again. He orders that the furnace is heated up so much that he wants these guys to crisp up And even the people who are going to throw them in die because they're overcome by the heat. He hates threats to his power. And that's one of the things power does. Power leads to cruelty. When you live for power, a number of things come together. Everything is about you. Everything is about you. You know what's best for everyone. Any threat to your position or to your power, you have to take out. You have to take it out. You either have to put people in their place, or if you're someone like Nebuchadnezzar and you can do it, you'll have a furnace that you can chuck people into if you want to. The more power that you have, or the more power you gain, the more options you have to wield it in ever more unaccountable ways. And if you get to a position like he did, you can do whatever you want. So, while you, as far as I know, don't have a furnace that you can literally chuck anyone into, if you do, make yourself known to the police. If you don't have power where you think, okay, I can squash people like a bug if I want to, maybe you can. Maybe you do have that level of power. So if you're someone in the workplace who has to appraise other people, you can squash them like a bug if you want to. You can make a passive-aggressive comment and destroy them. If you're someone who lives for power in your family and you like to control what everyone's doing, what everyone's saying, you can mold those around you to your will. You can do it if you want to. So it could be that gossip is your furnace. You know, with just the right word to the right person, you can take someone out if you want to. In the series Doctor Who, a few series ago, the Doctor manages to take out a prime minister simply by whispering 4 words. Doesn't she look tired? Now, it might be that you don't take down a prime minister, but gossip can take someone out. If you have power in a social group, you can squash someone with just a few words whispered to a person. And if power has become an idol in your life like it had to Nebuchadnezzar, you'll be tempted to do this. You'll be tempted to do this. When things don't go your way, you'll be furious. He was furious all of the time. This is how power corrupts us. This is how it does it. It makes everything about you. And you can do it smiling at someone over a cup of coffee. What we see as we look at Nebuchadnezzar is he is incredibly cruel. He looks really powerful, so his power has led to cruelty, but there's something that lies beneath his cruelty. It looks like he's on top of the world. It looks like he's number one chicken. But actually, if you scratch him, if you look below the surface, what lies beneath his power is fear. That's the other thing that will happen if you live for power. You will be absolutely terrified. So again, look at the start of chapter 2 and verse 1. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. He's scared of his dreams. In chapter 4, we see the same thing again in what was read. In verse 5, he says, I had a dream that made me afraid. He's scared by his dreams. And to understand what's going on there, we have to live in his world and see things through his eyes. So as far as he's concerned, dreams are given to him by gods. They reveal to him the future. They reveal what's going to happen to him. They aren't just the product of spicy food. If he has a dream, he thinks something is going on. And that's something the Bible would agree with. At times, God does speak to you through dreams. It is something that can happen. And God has been speaking to Nebuchadnezzar at various times. He hasn't realized it, but it's happening. So why was he so troubled that he couldn't sleep? What happened? Well, in chapter 2, he's had a dream which is producing anxiety within him. And he suspects he knows what it's saying. So, in that particular passage, this man who lives for power and honor and protecting his kingdom, he's reached the pinnacle, but he's had a dream about a huge, big statue that is comprehensively destroyed. And he's thinking, is this about me? is this about me? Am I about to be destroyed? Am I going to be forgotten? Because he sees a statue that turns into dust and is blown away, and he's thinking, is that me? It's keeping him awake. It's driving him to fear. It's making him cruel. And so, underlying all of his cruelty and all of his power is a fear that says to him, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose everything. That's fantastic. I wonder who that was. When you have a hidden God of power, that's what it will do to you. When that area of life is threatened, you'll be kept awake. You'll be full of fear. And if you don't deal with it, you'll be terrified and full of anxiety all of the time. And even if you manage to kind of get over it, but you still live for power, it will just transfer it somewhere else in life. So if you lived for power in the workplace, when you retire, you'll be the sort of person who'll find some other way to wield your power. So you'll become the neighborhood watch guy who takes over neighborhood watch. You'll join a club and everyone will think, oh no, I wish he hadn't joined. You'll be the pain in the neck for all of your neighbors who are telling them that they've slightly parked on the curb or something like that. You will fire bitter darts via email. If you live for power, you will always find some way to wield it. And when Nebuchadnezzar starts to see his world threatened, he reacts just like that. He's full of fear, he's full of cruelty. When he has his first dream, Daniel is able to interpret it for him in a way which kind of sorts him out for a while. So he's able to say to Nebuchadnezzar, that statue is about kingdoms, and you are part of it, but you're the gold head at the top. You're the most important part. And that kind of placates him for a bit because, hey, he's learned when Daniel tells him what the dream means that his kingdom is all awesome and everything that comes after him isn't as good. He likes that, but he hasn't changed. He hasn't changed. He still loves power. And that's where we meet him in the next incident. So immediately after chapter 2, where he's just had this dream about a statue and he's been told that the gold head is you, the next thing he does is he builds a big statue made out of gold. I wonder where he got that idea from. And then he says everyone's got to bow down to it. So he's still living for power. Then we come to our reading. And the next thing you see about power is, yeah, it makes you cruel. Yeah, it leads to fear. Power is fragile. That's the next thing. Power is really fragile. So he has another dream. And this time it's of a tree. This tree is impressive. We get told that it's visible wherever you are in the world. Everyone can see this tree. There's fruit on it. The birds live in it. Everyone is fed by this tree. And then there's a voice that says, cut it down. Cut it down. Turn it to a stump. And then it starts to say that this tree's a man. And it says, let him be drenched with dew of heaven for 7 years. And Nebuchadnezzar again is terrified and scared. And this time when Daniel comes to him and says, I'll tell you what the dream means, this time he tells him it's totally about you. It's not about those who come after you, Nebuchadnezzar. This dream is totally about you. And then he tells him what's going to happen. A man who lives for power is told, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose control of yourself. You're going to lose control so much that you'll be like a wild animal eating grass until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all and he gives the kingdoms of the earth to whoever he wishes. Nebuchadnezzar's told, you're going to lose it all. But he still doesn't learn much. So in verse 29, 12 months later after being told all of this, as he's walking about on his roof, as he's looking from his palace at all of the splendor of his city where he lives, he says this, is this not the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? He looks at everything and says, look at what I've done, aren't I awesome? And immediately God acts. Immediately acts. The academic lesson that he had in his first dream now becomes very, very personal for him. God speaks and he says, you're going to lose your throne, you'll be cut off from people, you're going to eat grass until you acknowledge that I give power and position to anyone. And for 7 years he lives like an animal until he raises his eyes to heaven And he deals with the problem and he says, actually, God is better than me. History records that what the Bible says about Nebuchadnezzar is right on the money. So he was the Donald Trump of the day. His name was everywhere. So on anything that he would build, the bricks would look like this. So it doesn't look overly impressive, but on bricks would be stamped the words, "I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon," and then it would list all of his achievements. He put his name on absolutely everything. It says it somewhere else in an archaeological dig that he built a summer house for this reason, a building to be admired by the people, a gleaming sanctuary, my royal abode. He was all about himself. He would have put his name on anything, absolutely anything. And God looks at someone like that and he says, when they say, "I did this for my glory and for my majesty," God looks at anyone who says that and says, "No, I could have put absolutely anyone in your place. Absolutely anyone." And if you're someone who lives for power in your workplace or in your family, that's the beginning of how to kill it. So verse 25, let's look at that again. It says there that the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the earth, and he gives them to anyone he wishes. So power can make you cruel if you live for it. It can make you fearful. It's fragile. But actually, power is a gift. Power is a gift. Those words in verse 25. Look at them again. What God says to Nebuchadnezzar is this: I put you where you are. You're king over the known world, and I put you exactly where you are. And now, if that's what he says to Nebuchadnezzar, hear those words over your own life. Wherever you are, whatever workplace you've risen to, wherever you are socially, wherever you are within a church or within a family, whatever position you've got to, God put you there. God put you there. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 which really drives this home. It says, "What do you have that you did not receive?" What do you have that you did not receive? And essentially that is saying to us, look at your life, think of everything you've got, and if you think any of it is down completely to your ability and your ingenuity or your strength, you've got to realize everything you have is a gift from God. So play that out with your life. Because it could be at the moment you think, no, I've worked really, really hard to get where I've got. You only have what you have because of the year you were born in. If you'd been born 500 years ago, you would not have the prosperity that you have now. You'd have been living in obscurity. You only have what you have because of the location you were born in. If you were born in a mud hut in Africa, you wouldn't have everything you have. You had nothing to do with those two events. God placed you where he's placed you. And the third thing, yes, you have talents and you have abilities, and you might have worked hard, but who gave you the talents and who gave you the abilities? God did. He gave you absolutely everything. You might have got a degree, you might have raised a business, you might have raised a family. All the raw materials you had, God gave you every single one of them. If charm has enabled you to bewitch the man or the woman of your dreams and you think, I did really well there, God gave you that. If people look at your artistic flair and say you're so talented, God gave you that. Absolutely everything you have, God has given to you. What do you have that you did not receive? This week, people have been remembering the life of Stephen Hawking. He's been in the news a lot. They've spoken about his achievements and his great mind and his courage in the face of adversity. If he'd have been born on the other side of the world and lived in a yurt, that's a tent, he would have lived in obscurity, struggled in poverty, and died in obscurity. And no one would have known his name. Everything he achieved because God gave him the gifts to do it. That was Nebuchadnezzar's lesson. That is what destroys the hidden God of power, because it shows everything up for what it is. Everything you have is a gift, and it can all be taken in a moment. It can all be taken in a moment. I read a book this week by Bill Hybels called Descending into Greatness, and what he said applies brilliantly to the hidden God of power. He says this: all too often we use our resources, our talents and charm to get what we want, hiding our motivation in subtlety or feigned ignorance. We know it by different names: office politics, turf wars, marital rights, parental perks. But it always points to the same thing: a misuse of power. Who of us hasn't resorted to a little manipulation with our spouse? A slight mistreatment of a co-worker competing for promotion? Which of us hasn't responded impatiently when someone underneath us on the pecking order asks a favor? Or responded to our kids with a thoughtless, "because I said so"? That one hit me this week. The amount of times I say "because I said so." What happens when the janitor at our company wants 5 minutes of our time? Or the single mum next door asks for a favor? How do we react? Depends on our mood. The pecking order gives us a kind of flexibility to treat people who are below us on it different, professionally, monetarily, in all different kinds of ways. I want you to look again at 1 Corinthians 4, verse 6 and 7. What do you have that you did not receive? What do you have that you did not receive? Knowing that everything that you have is something you receive, that wounds the idol that says, "I'm going to use my power," because it humbles us. It humbles us. And what might be a really good thing to do when you go home is to do this. Look at everything that you have. Look at your house. Look at your car. Look at your possessions. Look at your family. Think about your job and tell yourself the truth about it. It's a gift from God. Look at everything you have until that sinks in. It's all a gift of God's grace. And then when you go into your workplace tomorrow, if you're one of those lucky people who has a designated parking space and you look at everyone else struggling to find where to park, remind yourself, I received all of this as a gift from God. Absolutely everything. And then when you do that, you'll see how pride drops away. You'll see how anger and cruelty drop away. You'll see how fear drops away, because you know everything is a gift. That will help you start toppling the idol of power in your life. But there's a better way. There's a better way as well. We topple the idol of power by looking at Jesus Christ. That's how you do it. Nebuchadnezzar's first dream that he had, when he sees that statue broken up by a rock, it tells us that one day there'll be a king whose kingdom fills the earth. Jesus is that king. We started our service today in Philippians chapter 2, which tells us that Jesus Christ is completely and utterly God in every single conceivable way. Completely God. And he comes and he serves. That's how he uses his power. He has all of the power there is, and he comes as a servant. And he even goes to the cross so that we might be forgiven. He humbles himself that much. If you've placed your faith in Jesus Christ, that's what you're called to do as well. When he says in the Gospels, "I have not come to be served, but to serve and give my life for many," he's done that for you. He served you in the most extreme of ways. Who are we to not follow his example? Who are we? So tomorrow, what kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to be striving to be chicken number one? Are you going to be pecking at everyone? Are you going to be, I won't continue that analogy actually. Are you going to be like the chicken who's just getting at everybody else? Or are you going to be the person who knows everything you have is a gift from God, that he's placed you wherever you are, and Jesus Christ has died for you? If you go with that second attitude, you won't want to cling on to power. You'll want to serve people. You won't be compassionless. You'll be full of compassion. You won't be cruel. You'll be kind. So tomorrow, go with that thought. What do I have that I did not receive? And look at Jesus as well. Let's pray. Father God, we want to thank you for Jesus Christ. That's actually what we want to thank you for most of all, because he shows us how to use the power that we have. He had awesome power. He had unlimited power. He could, in human terms, have done whatever he fancied. And he used his power to serve the people around him and to serve us. And so we ask today that we might follow his example better. We might be inspired by what he's done for us, and we might seek to serve those in our family and in our workplace and in our neighborhoods. And we ask that even as we go home, we might look at everything that we've got and remind ourselves that it's all a gift from you, that it's not to be clung on to. It's not the thing that defines us. You are what defines us. You have given us so much. You've given us everything. And so we ask that if there are any of us who have that little God of power within our hearts, we ask that we might topple it by seeing that everything is a gift and that Jesus Christ gave his life for us. Help us do this, we pray, and we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.